So, let me start with a question. On the morning of June 3rd, 2026, President Donald Trump appeared on the New York Post podcast and said something I want you to remember. He said, and I'm quoting directly, "Iran has already agreed they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. That was the big thing." And then went further. He said, "Iran has no navy, they have no air force, they have very few soldiers, they have no leadership, their economy is crashing, they have 250% inflation." Okay? So if you heard that and you thought to yourself, America is winning this thing, I completely understand why you would think that. But here's the problem. I want you to look at what actually happened on that exact same day, June 3rd, 2026. On the same morning, Trump was saying Iran has no leadership. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched approximately 30 ballistic missiles and drones at Kuwait. They struck Terminal 1 of Kuwait International Airport. One civilian was killed, 63 people were wounded, the airport shut down all commercial flights. And then that same day, Iran's foreign ministry officially suspended all negotiations with the United States. Not paused, not delayed, suspended completely. And then Mohsen Razi, military advisor to the supreme leader, posted publicly. He wrote, "History will not turn back. The aggressor will be swiftly punished. Any further act of aggression by America will be met with a barrage of missiles and drones." Okay, so you have Trump saying Iran is broken, finished, has no navy, no air force, no leadership. And on that same day, Iran is launching 30 ballistic missiles, shutting down an international airport, suspending all talks, and threatening a barrage of missiles and drones. These two narratives cannot both be true. And today, I want to spend the next 20 minutes showing you exactly what is wrong with one of them, because CNN is not telling you this. Fox News is not telling you this. They're all asking the wrong question. They're asking, can America force Iran to surrender? That's the wrong question. The right question is this. Is Iran becoming North Korea? And if so, what does that mean for the rest of the world? Okay, let's go. The first thing I need to do is introduce you to a framework. I call it the North Korea model. And this is the lens through which you need to understand everything that is happening right now. Let me ask you a very simple question. Why doesn't the United States attack North Korea? Think about this for a moment. North Korea is significantly poorer than Iran, geographically smaller, no meaningful oil, no critical maritime choke point. And if you look at pure conventional military power, the United States could theoretically destroy North Korea's military capacity in 72 hours. But the United States has never done it and will never do it. Why? Because North Korea did exactly four specific things that made the cost of any military action completely and utterly unacceptable. North Korea engineered a situation where the potential gains of attacking them were vastly outweighed by the potential consequences. That is the North Korea model. You don't have to be stronger than America. You just have to make attacking you not worth it. You have to raise the cost of intervention so high that even a superpower looks at the situation and says, not today, not ever. And what I'm going to show you now is that Iran right now, in real time, as of June 3rd, 2026, is methodically working through each of those four conditions, step by step, with remarkable strategic discipline. This is not an accident. This is not desperation. And this is a long-term plan. And the fact that no major news channel is framing it this way is honestly one of the most important analytical failures I have seen in years. Okay, let's go through the four conditions one by one. Condition number 1, real nuclear deterrence, not nuclear hedging. Real deterrence. Now, I need you to understand the difference between these two things because it is crucial. Before this war started, Iran was enriching uranium to 60%. 60% is technically sufficient to build a weapon, but Iran had not built one. They were at the threshold, but had not crossed it. Nuclear scientists call this nuclear hedging. You keep the option open, but you do not commit. You stand right outside the door, but you do not step through. And here is the thing. That is exactly why the United States and Israel attacked Iran. They understood that if Iran crossed that threshold, if they actually built and tested a nuclear device, the game was over. No more military options. So the entire bombing campaign on Natanz, Farao, and Isfahan was designed to destroy the program before Iran could complete it. Okay. But here's the paradox, and I want you to sit with this, because this is really important. By attacking Iran before they had nuclear weapons, the United States and Israel have now given Iran the most powerful argument in the world for why they must have nuclear weapons. Think about what Iran watched happen to other countries. Libya. Gaddafi gave up his nuclear program in 2003. He was killed in 2011 when the West supported regime change. Iraq, no nuclear weapons, so America invaded and destroyed the government. And now Iran attacked by the US and Israel even while nuclear negotiations were still actively ongoing. What conclusion does any rational government draw from that pattern? The conclusion is the only thing that protects you from American military intervention is a nuclear weapon. Full stop. And this is not speculation on my part. Allen, a former American diplomat with decades of experience on Iran, said this on June 3rd. Iran would likely attempt to obtain a nuclear weapon, which wasn't the case before the war. Read that again carefully. Before the war, Iran was not pursuing weaponization. After the war, they will. The bombing campaign designed to prevent Iran from going nuclear has almost certainly accelerated Iran toward nuclear weapons. This is the central irony of American strategy. And look at the North Korea comparison. Kim Jong-un tested his first nuclear device in 2006. And after that, the threats from Washington became speeches, just speeches, because once you have a real deployed weapon, not enrichment capacity, not hedging, but an actual nuclear device, you have purchased your existential insurance policy. The cost of confronting you becomes unacceptable to any rational actor. So when Trump says Iran has already agreed to give up nuclear weapons, I want you to understand something. That statement is geopolitically impossible. It runs directly contrary to every lesson Iran has learned from the last 20 years of international relations. No government that has watched what happened to Libya, to Iraq, and now to themselves would ever give up the path to nuclear deterrence. It would be suicide. That is condition number 1. Let us move to condition 2. Condition number 2, permanently cutting off Western diplomacy and establishing non-negotiable red lines. Here is what North Korea did. From 2019 onwards, they stopped all meaningful negotiations with Washington. Did not pause, did not ask for better terms. Stopped. And then they amended their constitution to remove the goal of peaceful reunification with South Korea, formally designating South Korea as a permanent enemy. This was not a negotiating tactic. This was a strategic commitment. It said, "We want nothing from you," which means you have nothing to threaten us with. Now look at what Iran did on June 3rd, 2026. The Iranian Foreign Ministry officially suspended all negotiations with the United States. The language was completely clear. There will be no further dialogue until Israel permanently ceases all military operations in Gaza and Lebanon. Why is that condition so significant? Because it is a condition the United States cannot satisfy without fracturing its alliance with Israel. Iran knows this perfectly well. This is not a negotiating position designed to reach a compromise. This is a red line designed specifically to be uncrossable. And that is exactly the kind of strategic clarity North Korea demonstrated starting in 2019. And listen to how the deputy speaker of the Iranian parliament framed this on that same day. He said, "We will negotiate if necessary, but we do not trust any promises from the Americans. They committed crimes against us in the most brutal way possible." That is not the language of a side looking for a deal. That is the language of a side that has decided it is fighting alone, and that is exactly the posture North Korea has maintained for years. When you make it known that you have nothing to gain from negotiation, you remove the other side's leverage entirely. Iran is engineering the same negotiating vacuum that North Korea has operated in, and it works. Okay, condition number 3. Condition number 3, deep integration into the Russia-China-Eurasian axis. And here I want to connect this to a much larger picture because what Iran is doing is not just about its own survival. It is participating in a historically significant project, the slow dismantling of the petrodollar system that the entire American empire is built upon. Let me explain what that means. The petrodollar system was born in 1973 and 1974. When the United States made an agreement with Saudi Arabia, all global oil would be priced and sold in US dollars. This was brilliant. It meant that any country that wanted to buy oil had to acquire dollars first. This created an enormous artificial demand for American currency, and that demand allowed the United States to print money, run deficits, and impose financial sanctions on anyone who challenged them. But here's what I want you to understand. Iran, together with Russia and China, is systematically dismantling this system. Not all at once, piece by piece, day by day. Let me give you specific numbers because this matters enormously. China is currently importing 31% of Iran's total oil exports, not in dollars, in yuan, Chinese currency. Every barrel of oil that China buys from Iran and yuan is a barrel of oil that does not require dollars. That's one transaction that bypasses the American financial system entirely and makes the sanctions meaningless. And then there is a cryptocurrency dimension. Iran's domestic exchange, Noitex, was processing over 50% of Iran's digital capital flows in 2025, hundreds of millions of dollars in stable coins that the Iranian central bank used to stabilize the currency and fund the IRGC. When the United States tried to shut it down, Iran adapted and rerouted because the whole point of cryptocurrency is that it is very difficult to block. And on the macro level, the BRICS plus bloc, which now includes Iran, controls over 40% of global oil production. These countries are building parallel payment systems. China's CPI's platform is designed to replace SWIFT. The Bomridge digital currency project processes real-time foreign exchange settlements between member countries. Every piece of this infrastructure is a brick in the wall being built around the dollar's dominance. Now, why does this matter for the North Korea comparison? Because this is condition 3. The creation of an economic survival infrastructure that makes financial sanctions almost irrelevant. North Korea survived decades of sanctions because China provided oxygen. Iran is building the same kind of relationship, but at a far more sophisticated level. It is not just survival. It is building an alternative world. And I want to say something important here. By weaponizing the dollar, by freezing assets, cutting countries off from SWIFT, running maximum pressure campaigns, the United States has convinced every country in the global south that they need an alternative to the dollar. Not just Iran, not just Russia, Brazil, India, South Africa, Saudi Arabia. They are all watching what happens when you rely on American financial infrastructure and then America decides to weaponize it against you. The U.S. sanctions regime is accelerating the very dollarization it is supposed to prevent. Okay. Condition number 4. Condition number 4. Asymmetric deterrence that makes American victory unacceptably costly. This is the most elegant part of the North Korea model. North Korea deters the United States not by matching American military power. That is impossible. But by creating one single credible threat that makes any military confrontation catastrophic. In North Korea's case, that threat is Seoul. The South Korean capital, home to 25 million people, is within range of thousands of North Korean artillery pieces. If war starts, Seoul gets flattened in the first hours. The United States cannot accept that outcome. So even though America could theoretically destroy North Korea's military, the cost is politically and humanly unbearable. That is deterrence. Iran has engineered exactly the same dynamic, but on a global scale. The Strait of Hormuz, 33 kilometers, at its narrowest point through that passage, 20% of the entire world's oil and liquefied natural gas supply flows every single day. Japan depends on this passage for 75% of its energy needs. India, 60%. China, 40%. The Japanese Prime Minister said explicitly, if the strait closes, Japan's economy collapses within 8 to 9 months. Iran has closed the strait, and the United States cannot reopen it. Now look at the military numbers. Iran is using Shahed drones. Each one costs at most $50,000. With these cheap drones, Iran has successfully attacked FAT systems and ANTPY-2 radars, systems that cost billions of dollars to build and deploy. And to intercept each $50,000 drone, the United States is firing Patriot missiles that cost $1 million each, sometimes 2 or 3 missiles per drone, because these systems miss. So you are spending $2 to $3 million to destroy a $50,000 threat. And as of June 3, 2026, the United States has consumed approximately 50% of its domestic Patriot missile interceptor stockpile. I want you to hold that number. 50%. For a war that Trump says Iran is losing badly because they have no navy and no air force. You see what is happening? Iran has figured out exactly what North Korea figured out. You do not fight the expensive way. You fight the cheap way in the places that hurt the most. Iran cannot match American aircraft carriers, but Iran can make it extraordinarily expensive for any ship to pass through the most important maritime choke point in the world. The IRGC made this explicit on June 3rd. They stated, "The only safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz is the one they designate. Any vessel that does not comply will be targeted. That is not a threat. That is a new reality." And that reality is Iran's equivalent of North Korean artillery pointed at Seoul. Okay. Now, I want to pull back and look at the much bigger picture because what is happening with Iran is not just a war, it is a symptom of a much larger historical process. And to understand it, I need to talk about the Roman Empire. I know you are thinking, "Professor, why are we talking about Rome when there are missiles flying over Kuwait?" Bear with me, because the patterns of how empires rise and fall do not change. They never do. The historian Thomas Madden makes a fascinating observation about Rome's decline. The Roman Empire was not destroyed by external enemies. It was destroyed by itself, by overextension, by the enormous cost of maintaining longer and longer frontiers, and critically by the disappearance of a common external threat. Here's what happened. When Rome finally destroyed Carthage and Greece in 146 BCE, eliminating both of its great rival powers, something strange occurred. Just 13 years later, Romans began killing each other on the hill. The thing that had held Roman society together, the sheer external threat, was gone. And without it, internal contradictions, class tensions, and elite competition came rushing to the surface. Does this sound familiar? In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. America lost its most significant external threat. And since that moment, America has been turning inward, fighting itself. Red states versus blue states, left versus right. The January 6th Capitol riot. The polarization has accelerated with every decade that passes, and analysts who study historical patterns point out that America is now in what they call the late Republic phase, where the outward form is still democratic, but the actual function has become increasingly imperial. And here is the number I always return to when I think about this. The average lifespan of major global empires in recorded history is approximately 250 years. The American Republic was founded in 1776. The year we are discussing right now, 2026, is the 250th year of the American experiment. I'm not saying this as prophecy. I'm saying this as a historical observation. These patterns exist. They have always existed, and they are worth taking seriously. And what we see on June 3, 2026, are concrete symptoms of this pattern. European allies refusing to join an American coalition to escort ships to Hormuz GCC countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, the UAE looking for separate accommodation with Iran to protect themselves. The United States unable to fulfill the core function of a hegemonic power, guaranteeing freedom of global maritime trade, and visibly failing to do so. This is not Pax Americana functioning. This is Pax Americana becoming history. Now I want to address something that almost nobody in mainstream media is discussing, and I think it is actually the most important thing to understand about this entire conflict. Even if both sides wanted to stop, they cannot. And the reason is psychology. Let me explain the American side first. There is a school of thought in American foreign policy called Jonean Doctrine. It has enormous influence over the Trump administration, and its core principle is this: any sign of accommodation, any concession, is a display of weakness, and weakness invites aggression. If you step back one step, your adversary will advance 2 steps. Therefore, you never concede. He said on the record that Iran has no navy, no air force, no leadership. He has publicly committed to a narrative in which America is winning decisively. Given that framing, what happens if he now sits down and accepts a deal where Iran still has an active nuclear program, still controls the Strait of Hormuz, and still has a functioning IRGC? That deal from a Jonian perspective is a catastrophic humiliation. It signals weakness, and weakness invites more aggression. So Trump cannot accept such a deal, not because of Iran, because of his own publicly stated framework. The psychology locks him in. Now look at the Iranian side. This is Shia Islam. And at the heart of Shia Islam is a theology of martyrdom. When Qamadiya was killed in the American strikes, that was not experienced by Iranians as a military defeat in the Shia framework. The death of a religious leader in defense of the faith is the highest form of martyrdom. It is a sacred act, and it activates a religious obligation, a jihad, in every Shia Muslim. The joint statement issued by the Iranian armed forces on June 3rd, the anniversary of Khamenei's death, which makes it doubly significant, said this: "The Iranian nation will not retreat in the face of threats and aggression. The armed forces will defend the ideals of the Islamic Revolution to the death." To the death. That is not rhetoric. That is a theological commitment. And here is the strategic logic that follows from it. The senior analyst Abbas Alani explained it precisely. Iran has no option but to retaliate, because any non-response is interpreted by the American-Israeli side as weakness and as a green light to continue and escalate attacks. So you have two sides, both psychologically and structurally locked into a pattern of escalation. Concession for either side is existentially dangerous within their own domestic political framework. Accommodation signals weakness. Weakness invites more pressure, so neither side can stop. And former American diplomat Alan Ayre said this plainly on June 3rd. There will not be peace. The best we are going to get is an extended ceasefire. Not peace, an extended ceasefire. A pause before the next escalation cycle begins. This is the trap. This is why the conflict continues. Not because either side is irrational. Both sides are being perfectly rational within their own frameworks. But those frameworks are incompatible, and that incompatibility is structural, not accidental. Now I want to be completely fair. I want to present the strongest possible argument against everything I have just said, because intellectual honesty demands it, and I never want you to just accept what I tell you. Here is the Steelman case for the American position. Professor, you are making Iran sound far more formidable than it really is. Look at reality. North Korea is a hermit kingdom with 25 million people and virtually zero presence in the global economy. Iran is different. Iran is under a complete naval blockade. Its nuclear facilities have been bombed repeatedly. 7 million Iranians have been displaced. Inflation is at 250%. No state can sustain that indefinitely. And Trump is right that America has overwhelming conventional military superiority. Given enough time and enough pressure, Iran will have no choice but to negotiate from a position of weakness. Economic collapse historically precedes political collapse. This is a genuinely strong argument. It has historical precedent. I cannot dismiss it entirely, but here is what that argument cannot explain. First, no government in recorded history has voluntarily surrendered power while under active external military attack. External pressure does not collapse regimes. It unifies populations around them. The Iranian Deputy Parliament Speaker confirmed this on June 3rd. Even with 7 million people displaced, none of them face shortages of bread or housing because the government managed distribution. The IRGC controls the resource allocation chain. The state is not fracturing, it is adapting. Second, the question is not whether Iran is suffering. The question is whether the United States can sustain this level of pressure indefinitely. While gas prices at home have risen $1.50 per gallon, while 50% of Patriot reserves already consumed, while European and Asian allies are quietly finding their own accommodations with Tehran, American domestic political pressure is not infinite. And every month that passes without a clear victory, the cost of this war becomes harder to justify to American voters. Third, and most importantly, Iran's goal is not to win this war in the conventional sense. Iran's goal is to survive long enough to complete the 4 conditions of the North Korea model: Every day, Iran exists. Every barrel of oil sold in yuan instead of dollars. Every cheap drone that forces a $1 million missile in response. All of this brings Iran one step closer to the strategic position where it is simply too costly to confront. This is not losing. This is patience. The American military is stronger than Iran's military. That is a fact. But modern war is not only decided by who is stronger. It is decided by who can endure longer. And that is exactly what North Korea proved. All right, let me bring this together and tell you 3 specific things to watch. The first thing I want you to watch for any signal that Iran is moving from uranium enrichment toward actual weaponization, not the enrichment itself. They have been enriching for years. I mean the next step, the engineering of an actual warhead. This is the point of no return. The moment Iran tests a nuclear device the way North Korea did in 2006, the entire geopolitical calculation changes overnight. America will not be able to strike Iran militarily after that moment without risking a response that could close Hormuz permanently and collapse the global energy market. Watch the IAEA quarterly reports carefully. Watch for any changes in Iranian government language around nuclear policy. The second thing to watch whether any GCC country, particularly Saudi Arabia or the UAE, breaks ranks and signs a separate accommodation agreement with Iran. When a country concludes that the American security umbrella cannot protect it from Iranian retaliation, it will act in its own interest. It always does. If you see Saudi Arabia or the UAE quietly negotiating bilateral arrangements with Tehran, that is the moment you can formally declare that American hegemony in the Middle East has ended, not weakened, ended. The third thing to watch whether China formally proposes a Gulf security architecture that excludes the United States. China did something similar in 2022 when it brokered the Saudi-Iran Normalization Agreement, a diplomatic achievement that Washington could not have managed. If Beijing now steps into the security vacuum created by American retreat from the Gulf and proposes a regional framework that includes Iran and the Gulf states but excludes the United States, that is the moment the transition to a multipolar world order becomes irreversible. Now for your homework. I want you to read the IAEA's most recent quarterly report on Iran's nuclear program. I want you to read the BRICS plus October 2024 summit communique. Look at what those countries are actually building together. Payment systems, currency arrangements, trade infrastructure. And then ask yourself if the information in those documents points in the direction I have described today. At what point does that change your understanding of who is actually winning this conflict? And if you think I have gotten something wrong, please push back. Tell me where the analysis breaks down, because this is how we get smarter. None of this is gospel. All of it is a model, and models are meant to be tested against reality. So let me close with one question, just one. On June 3, 2026, Donald Trump said publicly on a record that Iran has no navy, no air force, no leadership, and a crashing economy. He said, quote, "We are having a very great success in Iran militarily." Technically, on points of raw military comparison, Trump is not wrong. The United States military is vastly more powerful than Iran's. That is simply a fact. But now consider this. North Korea also has no meaningful navy compared to America. No air force that could compete. A broken economy by almost any measure. And yet the United States has not attacked North Korea. Has not come close to attacking North Korea because the cost is unacceptable. If Iran is truly as broken as Trump says, why, as of today, has the United States not won? Think about that carefully, because the gap between what is being said and what is actually happening, that gap is where the real story lives.